Uh, and I think that's really, I think obviously incredibly important. And do you think that businesses that don't take their environmental and social impact seriously are at risk of losing talent or being outperformed by businesses that are more purpose driven?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's there's less, well, there's really no excuse these days. And I was going to say there's less and less excuse. There's not really any excuse for businesses to not be at least taking initial steps to action. And I think that you will lose the loyalty and respect of your stakeholders if you're not kind of showing some steps towards progress. And there are, more and more and more great companies out there who are taking great steps and who are being proactive. And so, yeah, there's kind of no reason for employees to stay with a company that isn't aligned to their values and that isn't looking after them, when there's other great options out there.
It's really interesting. And I think obviously, and we're speaking a few weeks after COP26, and I think speaking to a lot of my friends and colleagues, I think there's a sort of a bit of a feeling of, well, this climate crisis is in the hands of people and forces much more powerful than me, and it can be, I think, a little frustrating for the individual within the globe. Well, this is certainly how I sometimes feel. What can employees do to impact the businesses that they work with if they don't think that they're living up to their standards that they should be when it comes to the environment, net zero, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I would usually encourage is try, first of all, where you are, raise your hand, raise your voice, and give the feedback that you want to see more, you expect to see more. And hopefully the squeaky wheel, gets the oil, or whatever the saying is. And hopefully if you can pull together a group of people who express to the company that you work for that you want to see more, then the ideal scenario obviously is that the organization will listen and take some action and make some positive changes. And I think that if you don't see that, and if there isn't kind of meaningful change, then it's a case of kind of voting with your feet. As you're saying before, there's lots of options out there. And so it will be the employees will have to learn the hard way of losing brilliant talent who will go elsewhere.
It's really interesting, and I'd be really curious to know, being in the space that you're in and speaking to businesses that are trying to do better, does that make you more hopeful because there are businesses that are jumping on board, or does it make you more pessimistic, given that I would imagine that, well, I know that B Corp still is such a very small proportion of the UK's or actually on businesses globally. So where are you sitting on that?
I think definitely hopeful. The increase in interest in B Corp is massive. As I mentioned before, I've been working with the B Corp movement in the UK since there's 5 B Corps in the UK, and there's now 500 and growing exponentially. There's it, yeah. There's
Great work, Amy. Single-handed.
yeah, it's all been me, definitely. But not only is it growing, but it's also this type and size of organization. More and more traditional businesses are interested in certifying. More and more large organizations are getting involved in certifying, and that's great. We want to see the organizations that need to make the most changes getting involved. And so I feel really encouraged, and definitely hopeful and positive.
Excellent. I think you have to be these days, don't you?
Yeah.
Otherwise you just bury your head in the sand and give up. So I think there are probably quite a few businesses like Instant Impact who are, so I'll give you an example of where we're at. I think we think that we're really proud of the place that we are to work. We're really proud of the ethics that we have as a business. We do see ourselves as a force for good as well as a business for profit. We are also incredibly busy. And I think that goes with quite a lot of growth, small, medium-sized growth businesses. When and actually it's just a question of like going through 100 or 200 questions is quite frankly a little terrifying. What would you say to businesses like ours in the position that we're in? Why is it worth us actually taking the leap and becoming fully certified?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say one of the things that I love about B Corp is that it does provide you with this brilliant framework and helps you to understand what are the things that we need to be doing, because it's really daunting to try and figure out, as you say, your business, you're growing, you've got so much on your plate, nobody has any extra time. And then it's like, oh, how should we change the world and be a force for good? It's a big, scary question. And so having something like the B Corp framework, although it is a lot of work, and that's part of the point, and it's a lot of questions, actually, if you break it down into bite-sized chunks, it's useful because it gives you practical things of like, okay, here's this policy we should put in place, or we should consider offering this benefit, or asking our suppliers this. And it just breaks it into tangible actions. And you can also spread that across your organization as well. So instead of it having to be like all on Felix's plate or whoever's plate, you can kind of break that down into, okay, each of us are going to work on, 5 actions this quarter. And if you're doing that across the team, it becomes something that then is then more manageable and that you can kind of work on at a pace that suits you. Because there's no, with B Corp, you have as much time as you want to work on the assessment before you submit it. There's no kind of strict deadline.
I think that's really interesting. I think actually when you're looking at the practicalities of doing it, I think it's a really important thing. So when you're helping companies through it, do you end up working with people at all sort of different seniority levels, helping them with their questions, building that sort of thing up? So it's not just a head of HR doing it, or HR team doing it, or C-level doing it. It's a full business.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And, we encourage that. We encourage you to include your team. And there's obviously going to be certain aspects that need to be answered by certain people who have expertise in that area. But as much as possible, we encourage our clients to include their team in the process so that everybody's feeling involved and they can have their say and contribute and be involved in it. But B, it's just useful and practical so that, like we said before, you're kind of sharing the work and the responsibility.
I can definitely see how that would be a bit of a unifying sort of call to action for the business as a whole. It's actually quite rare that you can have something that's that significant that everyone can get involved with. So I can definitely see how that would be exciting for the whole team.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's, going back to the point of showing to your employees that you care. And I think that most of the time people have realistic expectations. An employee most of the time is not going to expect for a company to be perfect or to change overnight, but they just want to see some meaningful effort. And if you can be open and transparent about that and show, look, this is the journey that we're on and we want to bring you on that journey, and even you can help us, then that's nice to see, just that there's effort being made and progress being made, and for people to feel invested or like they can contribute to that is really powerful.
That's fantastic. I'd be really interesting. What globally, are there any sort of countries that have a sort of, I guess, a commercial culture that's really sort of leading the charge in things like B Corp? Do you see big variances between different geographies?
Well, I think they're all at different stages. So, globally, B Lab launched in 2007. In the UK and Europe, B Lab UK and Europe launched in 2015. And then in other geographies, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, B Lab East Africa launched, etc. So everybody's at slightly different stages of their journey. At the moment, B Lab UK, I believe, is the fastest growing community, which of course we're very happy to.
What's it? It's 5 to 500. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think also we have geography on our side, and that the UK is a small country. And so it's a, and also is relative, you know, our law, company law in the UK is actually relatively well aligned with the B Corp standards. So it hasn't been, you know, maybe as much of a jump here as it might have been in other geographies, but yeah.
That's really interesting.
Lots of
And how about, I mean, you talked about those different elements of the B Corp certification. When you're working with your clients, where do you see, I mean, is there one of those areas that you often see like the biggest delta between where they are now and where they need to be?
I think usually environment is the area that is tough for people, either because it's a service-based organization and they're like, we work in an office, and actually oftentimes, you know, we lease that office or we're in a co-working space, and so we're not really sure of what we have the power to do or to change, or God, we never thought to measure our greenhouse gas emissions. What exactly is that? What do we need to do? You know, that kind of thing. Or for product-based organizations, it's tough. You know, it's a big challenge. You're developing a product, and there's a lot of difficult questions. And, you know, if you use plastic, that's not good, but if you switch to glass, that's more heavy and that uses more of a footprint, etc. So there's a lot of unclear challenges in environment, and some of it I think can seem a bit daunting to people.
Yeah, that is. How do I measure my carbon output as a services-based business in a co-working space? That's exactly who we are.
Yeah.
Any quick answers on that one, Amy?
Well, I think there are some good tools online that you can use to help you kind of do some estimates, and kind of quick calculations. You can also use a consultancy like Seismic to help you to, you know, do your
Good idea.
1, 2, 3 emission calculation. Also, the other thing to do is you can speak to your co-working space or your landlord and try and find out if they're measuring their, you know, energy usage, water, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. And at least if they can give you a per head estimate of, you know, the usage, that's something that can help you to understand what your usage slightly looks like. So some tips.
Excellent. And then on a personal level, I think obviously, as many of us do, you're thinking about our personal emissions and what we can do to offset. Any tips for Christmas, New Year, 3 best things that I can do for the environment in 2022 as an individual?
Good question. I think one thing is just a reduction in consumption. Something that I've personally learned over the pandemic and being in lockdowns and things like that is how much in normal times I would buy and consume that's just unnecessary. So I think, you know, whether that is just buying less overall, you know, less gifts, maybe do an experience instead of a physical present that you're going to forget about after a couple of weeks, or buying secondhand. It's something that already exists. You know, that's the most sustainable product out there, is one that already exists. So I would say that, and I would say, you know, an obvious one, but something that people don't always do, is switch to a renewable energy provider. If you can, obviously we're in a massive energy crisis at the moment, but switch to renewable energy. Just be responsible, be an environmental steward in your own home, recycle, and educate your friends. And I think actually you said it before on just trying to influence, hopefully those around you. So try and influence your employees or your landlord or whoever is in your scope. Even if you can be your own kind of mini activist and try and encourage others to be a bit more aware. Spread the love.
Awesome. Such great advice across the board today, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, it sounds like you're doing some amazing work with B-Lab, with Seismic, and yeah, keep it up.
Thanks so much, Felix. And you too. Thanks for all the work that you're doing.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.